Imagine waking early in a Victorian house and realizing that every meal you will eat that day must be cooked over fire. No electric stove, no microwave, no refrigerator humming quietly in the corner. Just coal, iron, and patience. In Victorian Britain, preparing food was not a quick task squeezed between other activities. It was one of the central routines around which the entire household revolved. From the first kettle placed over the fire in the morning to the final plates cleared away at night, the work of preparing meals shaped the rhythm of daily life. And at the heart of it all stood a single piece of equipment: the coal range. In many Victorian kitchens, this large cast-iron stove dominated the entire room. Inside its heavy iron body burned a constant fire of coal that provided heat for cooking, baking, boiling water, and warming the kitchen itself. But unlike modern stoves, a coal range could not simply be switched on. It had to be managed. Coal needed to be added regularly. Ashes had to be removed. Air vents were opened and closed carefully to control the temperature of the fire. Cooking was not simply a matter of turning a dial, it required experience. A skilled cook could judge the heat of the oven by placing a hand near the door, or by observing how quickly a piece of paper browned inside. Now imagine the kitchen early in the morning. The fire has already been lit. A kettle begins to simmer gently over the range. The smell of warm bread and tea slowly fills the room. Breakfast in a Victorian household varied greatly depending on wealth. In middle-class homes, the morning meal might include eggs, fresh bread with butter or jam, porridge and tea. Sometimes bacon or kippers, salted fish, were served alongside the meal. Tea, of course, had already become one of the most beloved drinks in Britain. Originally introduced through trade centuries earlier, tea had by the 19th century become woven deeply into everyday life. Morning tea, afternoon tea, evening tea. Few Victorian households went long without it. But not every family enjoyed such comfortable breakfasts. Working-class households often ate much simpler meals. Bread with dripping, the fat collected from roasted meat, was common. Porridge was another staple. Sometimes leftover stew from the previous evening was reheated for breakfast. Food had to stretch as far as possible. Now imagine another scene. A modest Victorian kitchen in a small London house. A mother stands beside the coal range, stirring a pot of porridge. The room is warm from the fire, though the rest of the house may still feel cold. Her children sit nearby, waiting patiently for their bowls. In many families, several children shared the same simple meal before leaving for school or work. Yet despite the simplicity of these breakfasts, they provided the energy needed to begin a long day. But there was another challenge every Victorian cook had to face: keeping food from spoiling. There were no refrigerators in Victorian homes. Instead, many households relied on what was known as an icebox. Large blocks of ice were delivered by ice merchants and stored inside insulated wooden cabinets. The ice melted slowly over several days, keeping milk, butter, and meat cool enough to last a little longer. But this method was far from perfect. In warm weather, food spoiled quickly, and careful planning was required to ensure nothing was wasted. Later in the day came the most important meal of all: dinner. In Victorian Britain, the midday meal was usually the largest of the day. In wealthier households, this meal could involve several courses. A roast joint of beef or lamb might be served alongside potatoes, carrots, cabbage, and freshly baked bread. Servants carried dishes carefully from the kitchen to the dining room, arranging them neatly upon the table. The process required coordination. Large homes sometimes employed multiple servants whose duties included cooking, serving, and clearing away dishes. Now imagine the kitchen of such a house shortly before dinner. The cook stands beside the coal range, directing the final preparations. Steam rises from several pots. A young kitchen maid peels potatoes beside the wooden table. Another servant carries a tray upstairs toward the dining room. The kitchen is warm, busy, and filled with the scent of roasting meat. When the household bell rings, the servants know the family is ready to eat. Meals in wealthier homes followed careful rules of etiquette. Guests waited until everyone had been served before beginning. Conversation was polite and measured. Elbows remained firmly off the table. Even the order of the dishes mattered. Soup might be served first, then fish, then meat with vegetables, and finally a sweet pudding. A well-run Victorian dinner could resemble a carefully choreographed performance. But life looked very different in smaller homes. In more modest households, dinner might consist of a thick stew, meat pie, or boiled vegetables. These dishes were practical. They could simmer slowly over the coal range while other work continued throughout the day. For many families, such meals were both affordable and filling. But what exactly did these meals look like as they were prepared? Imagine a large iron pot slowly simmering on the coal range throughout the afternoon. Inside, a thick beef stew bubbles gently. Chunks of beef cook slowly alongside potatoes, carrots, onions, and barley. The broth grows richer as the hours pass, filling the kitchen with a deep, savory smell. Slow-cooked stews like this were common in Victorian homes because they could feed many people while using inexpensive ingredients. Another favorite was meat pie. The cook prepared the pastry crust by hand, rolling the dough carefully across a wooden table. Inside the pie might be minced beef, kidney, or vegetables seasoned with herbs and gravy. Once placed into the oven of the coal range, the pie baked slowly as the crust turned golden and crisp. Puddings were also an important part of Victorian meals. One well-known example was suet pudding, made from flour, suet, and dried fruit. The mixture was wrapped in cloth and boiled for several hours in a pot of water until it formed a dense, rich dessert. Children in particular often looked forward to the pudding course. And of course, no Victorian table felt complete without fresh bread. In many homes, bread was baked directly in the oven of the coal range. The dough was kneaded by hand, left to rise near the warmth of the fire, and then baked until the crust hardened and the inside remained soft and warm. The smell of fresh bread drifting through a Victorian kitchen was one of the most comforting scents in the entire house. Victorian cookbooks also reveal how different some meals could be from what we eat today. Recipes sometimes included dishes such as pigeon pie, eel stew, or elaborate jellies made from boiled calves' feet. These recipes reflected a time when cooks used nearly every part of an animal and wasted very little. Preparing such dishes required patience. Bones simmered for hours to create broth. Meat was trimmed carefully and seasoned with herbs. Large pots cooked slowly over the coal range while the cook attended to other duties. And not every meal was eaten inside the home. Step outside into the streets of Victorian London and you might encounter another side of the city's food culture. Street vendors called out their goods to passing crowds. Hot, baked potatoes wrapped in paper, savory pies, fresh oysters sold from wooden carts. For many working people, these quick meals were cheaper and faster than cooking at home. But street vendors were only one small part of the Victorian food world. To truly understand where much of this food came from, one must imagine the lively markets that supplied the city each day. Picture an early morning in a London street market during the 1880s. Horse carts roll slowly along the cobbled roads, bringing produce from nearby farms into the city. Baskets of potatoes, carrots, and cabbages are stacked in neat piles. Fishmongers display rows of glistening fish laid upon beds of crushed ice. Butchers arrange joints of beef and lamb upon wooden blocks. Vendors call out their prices to the growing crowd of shoppers. Without refrigeration, freshness mattered enormously. Food bought in the morning was often cooked that very same day. Now imagine a cook returning from such a market. Her basket is heavy with vegetables, a joint of meat wrapped in paper, perhaps a loaf of fresh bread still warm from the bakery. Back in the kitchen, the coal range is already burning. Vegetables are chopped. A pot of broth begins to simmer. Bread is sliced. The ingredients gathered from the market slowly become the meals that will soon appear on the table. Now imagine yourself seated at that table. A candle flickers gently beside your plate. The smell of roasted meat fills the room. Outside, carriage wheels echo along the cobbled street. The cook has spent hours preparing the meal before you. Every vegetable chopped by hand, every dish cooked slowly over the coal range. Nothing about the meal was quick or effortless. Food had always been more than nourishment. It brought people together. Even in the demanding world of Victorian Britain, the shared experience of a meal offered moments of comfort and connection. But preparing those meals required constant labor. Coal had to be carried. Water had to be heated. Food had to be chopped, stirred, baked, and served. In many ways, the simple act of eating in a Victorian home represented hours of unseen work. Now consider this for a moment. Do you think you would have enjoyed eating in a Victorian household? Or would the long hours of preparation have made every meal feel exhausting? Today we prepare meals with the help of electricity, modern appliances, and refrigeration. For Victorians, every meal depended on fire, effort, and patience. And so, day after day, Victorian kitchens glowed with the light of coal fires. Pots simmered, bread baked, tea was poured, and families gathered around tables that represented not just food, but the work that made it possible. Now imagine sitting at that table once more, a plate of warm food before you, the soft glow of candlelight flickering against the walls, the quiet murmur of conversation filling the room. For those who lived in these houses, such meals were simply part of everyday life. A rhythm repeated day after day, as the coal range burned steadily in the heart of the home.